This is Neil King for Random Acts of Cartooning, and today I'm going to show you how to make an Instagram animation with Photoshop and Animate. But first, okay everyone, the influence for this episode is a book it's one of my favorite books, but the famous monster movie artist, Basil Gogos. So this is a book that shows, and really nicely printed too, this is a pretty big book, some of the images that he would have created for some monster magazines that I used to grow up with, famous monsters of Movie Land. And this was just a beautiful book, and it shows like what kind of an illustrator he was. He did all kinds of different things, but his claim to fame were these famous Monsters of Filmland covers. And what he does is a super realistic kind of painting, but his colorization is the stuff that's different. So he goes really wild with some of these things, and it's so beautiful. Like, it's kind of like an impasto style, like that really thick Rembrandt-like style that I just love every image that I see of it. Like, as soon as you see his work too, you'll be able, you recognize it because of the stuff, that you start seeing of it. But it's a great book, and it kind of goes through all the stuff that he would work on. Beautiful stuff, and even just something like an Anne Margaret, just such a, great illustrator, lots of covers, did all kinds of stuff. But again, this is the stuff we're talking about. Just beautiful, thick, Barnabas Collins. These are the covers and how they would look. And he just made his incredible imprint on the industry. Great King Kong. But look at the color, the use of color, the way that he's dealing with it. Kind of impressionistic. Just beautiful. So it's a great book to have, and it's like one of the ones I just can't help looking at from time to time. How great that is. Love it. Unbelievable craftsman. Amazing stuff. Basil Gogos. Get it. Okay, so here we are. I'm using Photoshop here, and I've created this Phantom of the Opera little animation. And what I have here on Photoshop, I'm showing all the layers that I've separated these two characters in. So it's the Phantom of the Opera, this woman behind him from the film, and I've created a background. These are the layers for that. And you can see how I kind of built up all of these layers that have to be animated once I go to Adobe Animate. So each layer has a line, and it has a colored version of it. So I'm doing this all in Photoshop. I could have done it in Animate completely, but I kind of prefer to draw in Photoshop and then bring it all over. So the process that I'm working on, and I'm trying to show here, is where all of these layers are. So really the next part that I'm trying to work on is this woman's dress. So the top part here that I'm trying again to see where I am with this is the woman's head. So for it to move just a little bit in the animation, I do have to separate it from the neck and the body. Now I have a whole lot of layers here, and it can get confusing, and what I should have done, as always, is maybe mark them as I go through, but I hadn't at this point. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that all the layers that I'm working on are figured out, and that which layer comes before another. Because once I get to Adobe Animate, I have to be able to have this layer, the line layer, and the colored layer. But even though this is all a black and white image, they have to be together, and I'm going to combine those two layers before I bring them into Animate. So what I wanted to kind of show here is the line art layer, which is the dress. And then I filled in on the layer below it. I just put it into a very light gray. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to put some shadow onto the layer of this dress. So I'm going to go in and I pick a really simple flat line. I have a Wacom Cintiq or Wacom, whatever you want to call it. And so I'm just going to go in and I'm going to get all the dark areas pretty simply in there to give it a little bit of value. Right? I'm checking it. There's the line. So I'm working right underneath. And I had drawn this directly into Photoshop. I didn't draw this in, what I usually use is Clip Studio Paint for my line art. So I just drew it right in here. And the technique that I use also with this, because I wanted all that texture that I just can't really get without using Photoshop, will be the last layer. And I'm just kind of getting these in here. Again, I want it to just kind of work together. I want them to seem like they occupy that same space. Because once I get to animate, everything becomes very simple. You're moving either the body, or you're moving the head, or you're moving the hands, and all the separate things. So I'm just trying to get everything in there. I'm using my paintbrush just like I would as if I painted anything. And I'm just going to block all this in. Right? So here's all the gray. Looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is put that texture on. And I have a specific brush that I've used. It's this pastel brush that when you put it on top of the color, it gives it that graininess that I like for this type of thing. Because when I'm drawing these monsters and stuff, it gives it a little bit of mood. It almost looks like a stipple. And it really gives that nice black and white feeling, you know, something that as if it was from a different time, and the graininess that I'm kind of looking for. So all I'm doing is, remember, this is all on one layer. If I was doing this for an illustration, I would have had this on its own layer. But in Photoshop, I'm just kind of getting in there. I want to make sure she seems like she's behind him. So I'm putting a little cast shadow from him. And just laying it in there. And this is the process to be able to animate something when you go into animate. And it's important that you figure out all of the parts that you're going to need. So you can see I'm just kind of finishing it up. It's looking pretty good. She looks like she now kind of works with that scene. And the thing about it is you just have to keep yourself aware of what layer you're on, and sometimes you have to erase it and stuff to make sure that it's not going to go over on top of another part of it. So this is the overall look of it. Again, I'm just checking to see what I have, right? And by taking eyes off of layers, you can see kind of what I did. There's the head, right? And if I select them both, you can see I'm going to put this head as if she's hugging him in the animation. So you see how it could kind of work. So I'm going to bring that above his head. So eventually when she does reach down to kind of give him a hug or from behind it, you know, like it would work. I'm going to have to move that body, but you can see that the head is separated from the neck and the body. That's all one piece. The hands are separate. You can see how that is. All of these separate little parts. Everything's ready to go at this phase. And what I'll do is I'll combine the line art with the color, or you know, the filled in area, to make it all one piece. I don't want those separate when I bring them into animate. So this is the finished stage of the Photoshop part, and it's ready to just be saved, and I'll move on. Okay, so here's the next part. So what I've done is I've combined, or I am combining with this, I'm merging the selected layers in Photoshop. So if you've ever done line art and colored the line art, you don't usually combine, merge the colors and the line. You usually keep it separate. But to bring it in Animate, I have to keep them together. So that's what I'm kind of doing. You can see all the separate little parts, the body of the Phantom, all that stuff. There's the dress, and you can see where they end. I could have made the whole dress by itself, but you're really not going to see any of it, so I didn't really have it. But I'm trying to show here that they're all separate layers. Now, for this animation to work, the idea is he's playing the piano, and she will reach down and put her arms, her hands or arms around him at a part in the actual animation. So you can see kind of that's where the body would be when she moves. I'll move the body and the head at the same time so it doesn't seem strange. So now what I have to do is add a layer, and I'm going to, with my brush tool, I'll come in and I'm going to draw two separate hands. I'm going to put both hands on two separate layers and just kind of get them in there and do that same process that I've done up to this point. I think for this, I think it would be wise for me to just speed up the video just so you kind of see it. Okay, so here I am. I have one hand that's on one shoulder, and it's on its own layer. There's the line art, and then what I'm doing now is I'm just coloring it in with a very light gray, and then with a darker gray I go on top for the shadow, and then I go with my textured brush to give it a little of that. And again, that's just barely there, that hand. And I do the opposite on the other side and clean up that face a little bit. And then I'm going to do the other side. Same idea, a clean line, and it's on its own layer. I put that on. I add a layer below it. I color it. Pretty simple hand. And that's just going to be on there as a separate layer. And what I wanted you to see is this is the process, a little really fast here, but just to kind of get the idea of where I came from all this stuff. Just trying to add some stuff to it. Hand is barely there. And then I put it on its own layer. So that's the way it is. Make it a little larger. You want to make sure it's in the right proportion. But that'll be on both of his shoulders, her hands eventually in the animation. Very important part to this. Now once you have that done, the next move is you want to save all your layers, make sure it's all there. Everything should be in place so that when you go into animate, that you can take each separate part, the head, the hands, the bodies, and move them with some simple animations. And the way that I make sure that before I leave into Animate, Adobe Animate, I'm just making sure all my layers have everything. The background I've made almost all one piece. The top of whatever piano is just indicated. You don't see anything major on that. And those are the layers, right? Remember, everyone, I am a working cartoonist, so make sure that you're using the links to some of the different stuff that I am selling. These are convention sketches, and I will be doing, and I'm always doing conventions, so if you ever see me out there, or I also do commissions. But here's some of my adult books, graphic novels. I do kid stuff too. But take a look on my Amazon store, and these are all for sale. And like I say, I do a certain amount of commission work, so if you're interested in some of the things that I've been posting, it's all there. Support me.
Like and subscribe, of course, as always.
Okay, so here we are. This is the Photoshop document, right? All my layers. So I'm going to open up Adobe Animate, and I think this is a 1080 by 1920 image, right? And that's the proportions for Instagram and for TikTok. I use it for both of the things, these animations. So if you know anything about Animate, and some people may not know anything about it, but what you do is you can bring in a Photoshop document and it can import all of the layers that you create. So now I have a bunch of layers. I import all of them. And you can see it just puts keyframes in this image. You can see they're all with rectangles on them. And so everything from the piano has its own, each hand has its own part. And the simplest thing about this is a very simple animation, is all I'm going to do is I'm going to add some keyframes so that it moves along. And I just have to make sure, this piece is probably going to be all of 15 seconds. So right now I'm working on a 24 frame per second setup. It could be less, but it's kind of a default. And you can see here, like those hands, they have to go below the layer of the piano. So my first move here is to make sure that I'm getting that piano above those two hands. You can see I move that layer up. So you can see now if he looks like he's playing the piano, the hand would disappear behind the piano. Very important. That's kind of how it works. So everything right now is in the first frame. So when you're in Animate, you have to realize that with that, the time codes that are down there on the bottom, those are all frames. And that you can just see how long it's going to be. So every 24 frames is a second. So right now we have 1 second there, right? And I locked the layer of the piano so I don't keep grabbing it. I kind of get these in place. So when you think of the first frame, you're supposed to just say like, all right, everything's in place. I want to make sure that I have all the things that are going to work. The things that are moving first is going to be I get rid of that bottom layer that was just white. But you can see how many layers I have here. Just trying to make sure that everything's in place, right? So my next move, because I've used this for so long, I use a very classic animation. So I insert keyframes in what looks like about the 15th frame. And then I select all those layers together. So there's a first keyframe and a last keyframe for each one of those parts. So if you select them all at once with your command or your control down, you can create a classic tween. So for this classic tween, I'm now in the 15th frame. And if I click onto the keyframe in the 15th frame, you can see these are all the first frames. So I'm checking to see where they all are. And then if I go to the 15th frame, I can move them slightly. So there's the head. And if I use this tool, I can rotate the head or make it bigger or smaller. But I rotate it and maybe move it down a little bit. It's a simple move. It can't be too much because you want to have that little simple move. Now remember, I'm trying to just do a little bit of animation here. If this was a true animation, I could do frame to frame if I wanted to, anything I wanted to. But using these classic tweens, I can get a little feeling. So I move the body a little bit, and then I'm going to start thinking about moving those hands. So I click on the layer of that hand, make sure I'm locking that piano so it doesn't move on me. I click on the hand, and because I'm in the 15th frame, I'm going to grab that hand and move it down. Not all the way down because it would be too much, and that could be trouble when you're actually looking at the animation. So again, I'm just checking it all the time. I just keep grabbing the playhead and I pull it back and forth, and then start figuring out how I want these hands to work. Now, again, this is not some high level animation where I have the sound on the bottom and I'm trying to match the hands towards the sound. I'm just trying to get this feeling of these two characters, they're with each other. You're used to seeing these characters together if you've ever seen the film. And all I'm trying to do is make sure that I give the impression that he's playing the piano and that she's behind him listening. Now, the traditional story is that she's very scared and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I wanted to kind of make it seem like there's something there. And in this world, she really is in love with him. And he's just playing something for her. So that's the thought of it. But you can see how this works. And I'm already in what looks like about almost the 30th frame. And I'm just going to keep moving down and work this until I get to some, it's going to be a 15-second piece. So I'm going to have probably at least 300 some odd frames to bring it into Instagram. And then you save it. Okay, I exported it and put some sound on it in TikTok and Instagram. And so this is how it came out. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you next time.